I did not confront Coraline that night. I stood in the hallway, soaked from the storm, holding the truth inside me like a knife with no handle. She asked why I was staring at her, and I said I was tired. My voice sounded calm, but my chest felt tight, like the room had lost all its air. She watched me for a second, then turned back to the sink and kept washing a glass that was already clean. That was the moment I understood something was deeply wrong. Not because of one lie, but because of how comfortable she looked inside it. There was no fear in her face. No guilt. No sign that she cared what her choices had done to me. It was as if my pain had already been counted, measured, and accepted as the price of her new life. I walked to the study and closed the door behind me. My hands were shaking, but my mind was getting clearer by the second. A man can survive heartbreak. What he cannot survive is staying blind after the truth has shown itself. I sat in the dark and listened to the rain strike the roof while one hard thought settled in my mind. She had been planning my fall for a long time. And from that moment on, I knew I would not be the only one left standing in the ruins. Before Coraline, my life was steady and quiet. I fixed old houses for a living, and I liked that kind of work because it made sense to me. Broken things could be repaired if you gave them time, care, and strong hands. I spent my days around wood, dust, and worn walls, turning weak places into something safe again. It was not a rich man's life, but it was honest, and I was proud of it. I met Coraline at a dinner held in one of the old homes I had worked on. The place was full of polished people, but she stood out without trying. She had a calm smile and a way of speaking that made a man feel seen. When she talked to me, she did not seem bored or distracted. She seemed interested. That mattered more to me than beauty, though she had that too. We started seeing each other after that night, and being with her felt easy. She brought light into places in me that had been quiet for years. I thought she understood the kind of man I was. When we married, I believed I had found someone who valued loyalty, peace, and a simple life built with care. I gave myself to that belief completely, without holding anything back. The change in Coraline was so small at first that I almost missed it. She still spoke kindly, still kept the house neat, still smiled when others were around. But when we were alone, something felt off. Her attention was no longer with me. Her eyes would drift away while I was talking, as if she were somewhere else in her mind. She began asking careful questions about things she had never cared about before. She wanted to know how my contracts worked, where certain papers were kept, and which accounts were only in my name. She asked in such a soft way that it sounded natural, almost loving. I told myself she was only taking interest in our future. I did not want to see danger in my own home. Then her warmth started to fade. She no longer leaned against me in the evenings. She no longer reached for my hand without thinking. In public, she still played the part of a loving wife, but in private, she felt far away. One afternoon, I came home before sunset and heard her laughing behind a closed door. It was a private kind of laugh, low and familiar. When I stepped inside, she was alone and calm. She gave me a simple excuse, and I accepted it. Not because it made sense. Because I still loved her enough to choose doubt over truth. I found the proof on an ordinary afternoon, and that made it worse. Nothing in the room warned me that my life was about to split into before and after. I was searching for one paper and came across a folder that did not belong with the others. The moment I opened it, I felt the ground shift under me. At first, I told myself there had to be some mistake. But each page made that lie harder to hold. There were papers tied to money I knew nothing about, changes made without my knowledge, and details that placed my name at the center of plans I had never agreed to. Then I found the receipts and the notes. They were enough to strip away every excuse I had been making for her. One line stayed with me more than anything else. It was not romantic. It was cruel. It showed me that I had not only been betrayed, but studied, used, and laughed at behind my back. That kind of wound cuts deeper than infidelity. It tells a man that his trust was never precious to the person who received it. That evening, I said very little. I watched Coraline move through the house as if nothing had changed. But everything had. By dawn, I understood one hard truth. Our marriage had not fallen apart on its own. It had been quietly arranged. I kept my silence and started paying attention. Once I stopped seeing Coraline as my wife and began seeing her as part of a plan, small things became clear. Her lies had a pattern. Her movements had a rhythm. She was not acting alone, and it did not take me long to learn who the other man was. Ellery Sloane looked like the kind of man people trusted too quickly. He dressed well, spoke smoothly, and carried himself like someone who believed he could walk through life untouched. I learned enough to know that he and Coraline were deeply involved, and not just in secret meetings or stolen nights. They were making decisions together. Dangerous ones. What shook me most was not their closeness. It was their purpose. They were not waiting for me to leave or hoping the marriage would end on its own. They were building pressure around me, step by step, trying to place me in a position where I would lose control of my money, my work, and my name. They wanted me weak, confused, and too late to defend myself. That was when my hurt began to change shape. Grief was still there, but something colder settled beside it. I had spent years studying weak foundations, hidden damage, and the quiet signs of collapse. Now I could see theirs too. And once I saw it, I knew exactly where to begin. Once I understood what they were doing, I stopped reacting like a wounded husband and started thinking like a careful man. I gathered everything I could without leaving signs behind. Every paper, every record, every small detail that could prove what had been done. I made sure nothing important stayed in one place. If the truth was going to protect me, it had to be safe first. Then I reached out to the only person I trusted with something this serious. Mary Haynes had spent years dealing with property, contracts, and the kind of legal traps people build when greed takes over. I did not tell her the whole story at once, but I gave her enough to help me protect what was still mine. With her advice, I began closing doors Coraline did not know I had opened for her. The hardest part was not the paperwork. It was the acting. I had to sit across from Coraline at breakfast and speak to her like nothing had changed. I had to keep my face steady when she smiled at me. I had to live beside betrayal and never let it see that I was awake. That kind of silence changes a man. It teaches him control. And day by day, while she believed I was still blind, I was making sure that when the truth finally came into the light, I would not be the one destroyed by it. When Coraline said she wanted to invite guests for dinner, I agreed without hesitation. She thought it was another step toward the future she had planned for herself. I knew it would become something else. A house full of people was exactly what I needed. Lies are strongest in private. Truth does better in a room where no one can escape it. In the days before the dinner, Coraline moved through the house with fresh excitement. She spoke about table settings, flowers, and food as if she were preparing for a celebration. She even became softer with me again, like she wanted the picture of our marriage to look complete from every angle. I let her keep believing that. While she planned the evening she wanted, I prepared the one she deserved. I made sure the right people would be there. People who could confirm what she hoped to deny. People who cared about facts more than appearances. Bit by bit, everything came together. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was left to chance. By the time the guests arrived, I had already accepted what that night would cost. There would be no turning back once it began. The last of my doubt was gone. I was no longer trying to save my marriage or protect her image. I was waiting for the moment when her own choices would stand in front of others and speak for themselves. The dinner started like any other elegant evening. Candles lit the room, and the table was perfect. Coraline looked stunning in her green dress, and Ellery arrived with a confident smile, carrying a bottle of wine as if he owned the night. They moved through the evening acting as if nothing was wrong, exchanging glances and smiles that were meant to be secret. I let them keep believing that for a while. When dessert was served, I stood quietly and thanked everyone for coming. I told them there was an important matter I needed to address. Coraline froze for a moment, unsure, sensing something was about to change. I put one folder on the table, then another, and another. I calmly explained what each contained: hidden accounts, altered insurance papers, receipts for trips I had never taken, and all the plans she and Ellery had made to take from me. I spoke evenly, without anger, without yelling. The room went silent. Coraline tried to smile, to deny, to blame me, but each attempt met proof, each word met witnesses. Ellery tried to leave but was stopped by Mireille, who quietly reminded everyone that evidence can speak louder than intentions. That night, their perfect act fell apart, and I watched it crumble before my eyes. Coraline's downfall began the moment her lies were seen by others. It was not just being caught, it was losing the carefully built image she had spent years creating. The guests left uneasy, the banker refused to continue business, and the insurance company opened a full investigation into her actions. Ellery quickly turned on her, blaming her for almost everything, and in that instant, I saw the panic in Coraline's eyes. For the first time, she did not seem in control. She seemed small, exposed, and afraid. Within a week, legal actions were underway. Because I had prepared in advance, my business and assets were protected, and she could not touch what I had secured. The house she had adored, the symbol of her control and charm, was tied up and eventually sold. Ellery's reputation suffered quietly but effectively, as clients slowly pulled away once the truth came out. I did not have to manipulate anyone or spread lies. The evidence spoke for itself. Coraline had wanted me broken and humiliated, but instead, she watched as the life she thought she owned crumbled. She had assumed I would remain blind and trusting, but I had learned the hardest lesson of all: betrayal can create a strength that she never imagined existed. Months after the divorce, I found myself alone in a small town outside Beaufort. I had bought an old, run-down house with money I earned myself, money that Coraline once dismissed as too small for her dreams. The house was rough, floors uneven, shutters broken, but it had a strength in its flaws that felt honest. I began fixing it slowly, piece by piece, letting my hands do the work my mind needed. One evening, while sanding a worn banister, I thought of Coraline. Not with anger, not with longing. Just with clear understanding. She had tried to break me, but all she did was show me the danger of trusting someone too fully, of giving them power over your life. My revenge had been about more than proving her wrong. It had been about saving myself. By the time the house was restored, I had rebuilt more than walls. I had rebuilt my confidence, my focus, and my pride. Coraline had lost everything she had manipulated, while I gained the most important thing, my dignity. I realized that surviving betrayal made me stronger. Love without honesty is only a trap. I had walked through fire and come out steady, wiser, and free. And that was a strength no one could take from me.